Well, good day. Welcome to Riding with the Rector here. We're looking at Genesis. We just finished Genesis chapter 1, and we're getting into Genesis chapter 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to move backwards in time and re-explore the creation story. Now, I'm living in a premise. That both the description of creation in Genesis 1 and the description of creation in Genesis 2 can live side by side. They're not chronological, but they're meant to live side by side. That we're zooming in on the creation of the human species that took place on day 6. Now, for some scholars, it's just saying that two different people groups with two different legends came together, and both of them wanted their legend in the Holy Book. I mean, that's a possibility. That's reading the Scripture as though it was not stewarded by God, but it's the best mankind can do with the information they had. I don't live in that world. I believe the Scripture is exactly as God intended us to have it, and the church is in existence to help us with its understanding. So, for centuries, the church has jumped backwards into that last day of creation and zoomed in and said, what is happening in Genesis chapter 2? Well, in Genesis chapter 2, God brings the animals to man to name them. Because God is co-ruling, right? He's a prince in royal God's event, and his royal work is to look over the garden and tend to the animals. And so the animals are all given names. And because man is over the animals, none of them are suitable to be his long-term partner in this work. They can help him. They can be beasts of burden. They eventually become a source of calories. They eventually become a way in which God communicates his atonement to man. But right now, they're just helpers, and God has not found a sufficient helper among them. And so God puts man into a deep sleep, takes a piece of the man, and from that piece creates the woman. And so man is now missing a part of himself until he's reunited with his helper. The word in Hebrew is Azir. Until his Azir comes, and the two work together, right? And in working together, mankind is flourishing and doing what God has invited them to do. On their own, there's always a sense of something is not quite fulfilled. Now, is that to say that the goal of every human being is to be married? No, obviously there's some people who are called to celibacy. If you're raised Roman Catholic, the clergy are called to celibacy. In the Anglican world, some clergy marry, some are called to celibacy. It's a calling. Are you going to live in a single state where that missing piece is provided by God and a constant reminder of wanting the full fulfillment of God at the end of all things? Or will you be called to married life, where the two pieces will come together, but on the other side of the fall of Adam and Eve? And so, we have to work through the fact that we need one another, and yet our relationships are strained. There's brokenness there, right? The fights, the tense moments, the differences, and how are we going to parent, and those sorts of questions. Like, we need one another, and yet when we're together and fulfilling that role, because of sin, it's not 100% perfect. And that's okay, because one day we come into God's space, we're filled with the work of Jesus Christ, and he fulfills that work within us. And so God makes a woman for the man, they come together, and the scripture says, and therefore the man will leave the woman, or will leave his family and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And so whatever the familial relationship the man lives within, whatever his tribal affiliations is, he becomes his own entity at marriage and lives with his wife, and they become their own unit, their own agency, where they get to make decisions about what crops we will plant, how many kids we will have. They're still part of the larger community, but God is starting to create the beginning of individualized familial existence And so we're seeing that in the creation of woman, the beginning of marriage, that the two shall become one and become one flesh. And the very last thing I'll say, the two becoming one flesh, like God being three persons, one essence, the marriage of man and woman together point to the communal nature of our triune God. And so marriage is a declaration of the glory of God. And I hope that you would see that. And if there are hard times in your marriage, know that many marriages struggle and have hard seasons, and working through them is gospel work. It is good work, and it's worthy of your time. All right. Well, I'm going to bow out because I've given this one more time than I gave any of the other ones. So long.